we'll just give a couple minutes for everybody, kind of to come on before we start talking right away.
Okay.
But I am prepared. I have my Gettysburg wine glass. I'm drinking Rebel Red. So I got my Rebel Red. I was gonna do this in my I have a Gettysburg room.
Oh.
And it's all Gettysburg stuff. It's I have so much stuff up there. So I was gonna do it in there, but something happened with the light in there, so the lighting is like really bad. So I was like, darn it, because so I brought all my Nesbitt books down here, and and all that stuff. So, and here we are. So we have some people. Hello, everybody. We have some people joining us. I want to thank everybody for coming in. We have none other than the most awesome Mark Nesbitt, author, Gettysburg Ghost Tours. I mean, I'm very, very honored to have you on the show. I have to tell you, I have had, an awesome array of guests on, but you are somebody that when I first started getting into this field, was totally like, I looked up to you. So I really respect everything you've done. I have all your books, and every time I come to Gettysburg, and I come probably 15 times a year, I always go into Ghosts of Gettysburg. It's always one of I have to go in there stops, no matter what.
That's great. Well, that's fine. Thank you.
Yes. So, I'm going to shut up because nobody wants to hear me talk. They hear me talk every week. Aside from asking some questions and interacting with you, can we just start where Mark Nesbitt started and how he got to where he's at and Gettysburg and everything? I just want to talk about everything.
Okay. Do we have enough time? I've been in this business for quite a while, Yes. But yeah, where it all started. That's a good question. It actually all started before I was even interested in ghosts. I came to Gettysburg. Well, of course, as a kid, everybody comes to Gettysburg as a child, or at least by your senior class trip or whatever. So, but I came with my parents when I was a kid, and then I kind of get interested in the history, and so we started coming as tourists for a long time. Summer before my senior year in college, I was a little bit tired of working for my dad, working construction for my dad. So I said, I'm going to try and get a job in Gettysburg. And I really didn't care what I did, pumping gas or whatever. But I applied to the National Park Service, and I was lucky, and I got the seasonal job.
Wow.
That was extended into a 180-day appointment, which was just about full time. And by that time, they still do. They put park rangers in those real pretty historic houses out on the battlefield for security purposes. And so I got to live in 4 different houses out on the park, and every single one of them, I had something strange or unexplainable happen to me. Maybe the weirdest thing, or the most active place, was the National Cemetery Lodge. You know where the National Cemetery is? In the Iron Gates, not the arch, not the big brick arch. It's in where the Iron Gates are. There's a brick building right inside, and I lived there for several years. And I had several experiences in there that I absolutely could not explain. And the one that sticks in my head the most was the time I just finished lunch. So it was the middle of the afternoon, and I was taking my dishes out to the kitchen, and all of a sudden, I just froze. I stopped in mid-step because I heard a baby crying. And I stopped, and I'm like, that's impossible. I'm not, there's no kids here. I'm here with an adult housemate. And so I tried to explain it. You know how we always try and do that. Pipes, hammering, building settling, whatever. No, damn it, that was a baby crying.
Now, at
And
this
so
point, were you a believer in the paranormal, or were you like just an enthusiast? Were you
I was a collector. I was a historian
okay?
collecting folklore about Gettysburg. And so that's what I was doing at that time. And I had not really even started a book. Um, and I guess I talked about that. I casually mentioned it in the coffee room the next day to other park rangers. And one of them said, "Wait, you need to talk to such and such who lived there before I did." And so I got in touch with her, and sure enough, she had heard babies crying too in that house.
Wow.
And it just didn't make sense until I started thinking about the history of the area. 2 doors down towards town from the cemetery lodge was the old orphanage from the Civil War days. The orphanage,
Yes.
I'm sure you and other people are familiar with that. Started in
Yes.
1866, lasted about 10 years. The first house mistress was very nice. The second one was like something out of a Dickens novel. She was bad, evil, and she used to punish the children severely. And so hearing a child crying suddenly historically made sense. I mean, it made sense historically, but it didn't make sense logically.
Right.
You know, paranormally it made sense, but I wasn't really, into that too much then. So at any rate, I started hearing more and more stories, started writing them down. And I eventually had a pretty good collection. And in fact, and got a little bit of a reputation too. I know that some people from Gettysburg College had heard about me, and some of the professors. And when they would have students who were interested in that type of thing or wanting to write a paper, they would send them to me. And so years later, when I was writing the book, I went to Dr. Emmons, Charlie Emmons, because he was a sociologist there and doing and actually gave a talk on ghosts. And I asked him, I said, "Do you have any more information?" He says, "You need to, yeah, look through my files. I got kids that had written papers." And I found a couple of papers there where I was actually footnoted in the papers
Wow.
for the story. So, it goes around, comes around. So I wrote the first book it took about 10 years to collect all the stories. I wrote the first book, came out in 1991. And it was interesting because within 2 weeks of the book coming out, after taking 10 years to collect the stories, within 2 weeks, I was getting phone calls, letters, faxes. Of course, this is way before. Yeah, that's the first one. That's it.
I have it, and it's signed. Sorry. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. I got hundreds and hundreds of letters from people saying, basically, my neighbors are wrong. I'm not crazy. I actually had this experience at Gettysburg. And then they tell me their experience, and I started collecting other people's experiences, and I'd give them a call and have them tell me the story, and if it matched what they wrote, then I would consider, and I'd ask questions to flesh it out. And so that's how the first book. And that's how the second book actually came about. So now I'm working on Ghosts of Gettysburg 9. I still have stories and coming in. So I'm working on Ghosts of Gettysburg 9.
All right, not to freak you out, but here's all my Ghosts of Gettysburg books. So
all right.
I am waiting for 9. I have them all. I have them all.
That's great. Thank you.
Yes, I'm a huge fan. Okay, go ahead. So we're working on 9. So I remember, I know you don't remember, but I remember meeting you. You were doing a book signing, and it was at one of the little corner stores, I believe. I don't think the guy's there anymore, unfortunately, because he had such cool stuff in there. But you were doing a book signing there, and you were in the room. It had all the circle of all the maps. I can't remember. You pull the drawers out and the maps are all inside the drawers and everything. Anyway, it was a really long time ago. And I remember you telling me that you weren't actually an investigator. You were just following people around or getting stories and stuff like that. And then I guess maybe at some point that had changed where you just started. Now, was there someone that, pushed you into going into that direction?
Well, yeah, it was probably around book 4 or 5. Things changed from me being a historian, collecting folklore of the battlefield, and becoming an active or proactive investigator. And that was because of Rick Fisher. I don't know if you know Rick, but he was the president of the Pennsylvania Paranormal Society. He called me up and he said, Mark, we're going to be there. We're going out on the battlefield. Would you like to go with us? I said, yeah, as long as you're off by 10 o'clock. I don't want to get arrested. Former park ranger arrested on the park. Hey, I can see the headlines now, right? And I said, sure, I'll be glad to go out there with you. So we went out to a place called the Point of Woods, which is kind of partway out into the middle of the field of Pickett's Charge. And he had a digital thermometer, and here it is. It's dark out, and he said, this is really strange because I'm kind of getting some low temperatures, maybe 10, 12 feet away, and people started taking pictures, and they were getting pictures of orbs. And I said, what are those? And he said, well, those are spirits, spirit energy. I said, okay. And he said, they say appear to be cold. I said, well, I'm new at this. Let me go out there and see what's going on. So I walked out to the middle of darkened Pickett's Charge, knowing as a historian exactly what happened on that site. Mm-hmm. And so that was in itself spooky enough.
Right.
So I got out there, and it was a maybe a 50-degree evening, and I'm standing out there in a light coat. All of a sudden, I started getting so cold. Within 30 seconds, I could barely move my fingers. And I called back to him. I said, Rick, I'm freezing out here. He said, the temperature's dropped. And people are taking pictures, and they're picking up more and more orbs that are gathering around me. And I'm like, I got to get out of here. I'm freezing. So I turned around, came back. I said, I can't believe that. Because then it was warm again.
Right.
I said, I can't believe what happened out there. Well, that piqued my curiosity. Okay. And so I start, and it's the worst thing is to just get started on doing paranormal investigating, because then every time you turn around, there's some other piece of equipment you've got to have. You just have to. And so I spent a ton of money that first year, but then continued to do paranormal investigating after that. And then the interesting thing is, in 1997, we purchased the house there at 271 Baltimore Street, which was going to be the headquarters for the ghost tours. And little did we know that it was very active, but we soon found out, because we had to do some changing, interior changes, exterior changes to make it amenable to visitors coming in and out safely. And the workmen were still there. They were still there when I walked in to see how things were going. And the one workman, the very first story I heard about my own house was a guy who had been cutting trim. He was cutting the trim on the outside on the porch. And he said, he says, Mark, do you believe in ghosts? And I kind of laughed a little bit. I said, well, I'm starting a company that's based on ghost tours. And I said, why? I knew something was going on.
Right.
He said, I had cut a bunch of this trim, and I had it in my arms, and I walked up to the kitchen door. Now, the kitchen is the oldest section of the house. It was built in 3 sections. That goes back to 1834. It's definitely here at the time of the Civil War.
Mm.
He said, I had my arms full, and I walked up to the door, and I'm like, oh, so I'm juggling my arms around trying to get a hand free. And the outside door, it's aluminum. It's not the original, but the outside door swung open.
Mm.
He said, I walked in, I turned around to close it, and it swung closed. And I looked at him, I said, I don't know, maybe it was the wind. Of course, I'm looking at the flag, and it's hanging straight down. He said, I thought that too. He said, but it happened 3 more times after that.
Mm.
He said, I'd take 1 step towards the door, it would open up, I'd walk in, and it would close. And I told him, well, the guy that owned the place first was a guy who was a carriage trimmer. So obviously not the aluminum door, but whatever door was there at the time, 1834, that guy probably opened that 50 times a day for other workmen carrying stuff in.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the other good thing about owning a Civil War house in Gettysburg and knowing that it's active is that I can do experiments in there anytime I want.
Mark, you could just stop at it because it's, to me, I want to move there. So owning a Civil War house in Gettysburg, boom, that's it.
Like a dream.
I mean, that's just the cool. That's just like, that's it. But because, I mean, Gettysburg is just a very active place as it is. But yes, all right, go ahead, continue. I'm gonna shut up.
Well, no, it's true. It is kind of like a dream come true, especially if you're a paranormal investigator. I've done many experiments in that house. One time I wanted to know how important it was to have a person interact with the spirits to obtain EVP. So I remember it was one cold winter night. The back room on the 2nd floor appeared to be the most active. So I took my recorder up there and I set it on a table, put it on voice activation, turn it on, put it on voice activation. And I said, okay, we'll see you tomorrow morning. It's 11 o'clock. I'll see you tomorrow morning. Out I go. And the last thing I expected to hear, the first thing I expected to hear, and the last thing the next morning was me saying that. Well, I got up there the next morning and I announced myself saying I'm here. And I looked and the recorder had recorded 44 minutes with no one in the building. Well,
oh, wow.
No one alive in the building.
Wow.
44 minutes. And of course, it was a lot of white noise and a lot of, roars and stuff like that. It wasn't real, you couldn't understand a whole lot of it.
Right.
But that was one of those interesting things that just happened. And
somebody asked really quick, are you still collecting stories?
Oh yeah. About Gettysburg. Yes, I am still collecting.
That's awesome. You could write forever. I
found some stories from back in 2008, 2009. And I may have to write a book called Ghosts of Gettysburg: The Lost Files.
Yes, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, Kayla says, don't forget the Hidden Haunted Hotspots book and video.
Yes. That was an idea I'd gotten from a failed speech. I didn't fail, but I didn't get a chance to give it. But Carol said, well, gee, you did all this research. Why don't you just write a book about it? So I did. And it's all the haunted hotspots that people are not familiar with. And so I wrote about those places. I wrote, like I usually do, the history.
Right.
Then I wrote the ghost stories associated with it. And so that book hopefully should be coming out. Carol has everything she needs for it, so that might be coming out not too long. But the other thing that's interesting about it is that Kayla Miner and Eric, her husband, and I and Carol started doing some on-site investigations, and they're kind of an interesting format. We send Carol and Kayla far away from any signs or information. I tell the history of the site to the camera and Eric. Then we invite Kayla back, and Kayla tells us what she picked up. Just briefly, one of the sites is East Cavalry Battlefield.
Oh, I love it there.
Yes, and not a whole lot of people, still a lot of people don't go out there. They don't know about it. But she came up to me and she said, one of the strongest things people I'm hearing from is a guy by the name of Wade. I'm like, okay. And I try and do a poker face, okay?
Right, yeah, sure.
I try not to be surprised or react. I said, okay. And she said, but he was wounded here. He was like, he was wounded in the head. And then he was also wounded with, I forget what she called it, shrapnel or something like that. Well, the word is shrapnel. Now, I knew that General Wade Hampton had fought out there. He was like Jeb Stuart's second in command, Wade Hampton.
Mm-hmm.
Hampton had been wounded in the head. He'd been sabred in the head the day before, and I believe also during the battle at East Cavalry Battlefield. The thing I didn't know was that he was also wounded in the hip when a shell exploded overhead and sent a piece of shrapnel into him. So I didn't even know that.
Wow. Look at you, girl.
Yeah. Kayla is very talented. That's you can get a picture. You can get that out on YouTube, and we have others in the can, and we're going to do shrapnel. Okay, that's what she said. Shrapnel.
There was a question. Do you find the stories from a single location change over time? For example, do different spirits appear, or do the same seem to evolve? Yeah, that's a good question. Like, I'm sure a lot of people have. Like, I have a story from East Cavalry Battlefield. I have a story from Pickett's Charge. I have a story from the creek bed behind on Simar Ave. That's your first experience with like the coldness and everything like that was like my first experience, and it was in Gettysburg, and it was at the creek bed behind, all the stores on Simar.
Mm-hmm.
So, but do you find that people have different, or are they a lot? You find more similarities than differences?
Well, that's a very good question because I would have to say from my experience, the stories, the experiences are very similar. In other words, the same people. We have our resident ghosts in the ghost house, the ghost tour house. We know that Confederate soldiers, probably from Georgia, at least that's what they answered when I asked them, are there. Mm-hmm. We have a Hank who stands guard, Mrs. Kitzmiller who owned the place, the longest of anyone. But we also had a priest who sometimes would be there and sometimes wouldn't. And probably because of the nature of what he did in life. He would go around to the different hospital sites, which was just about every place in Gettysburg, and check on the men. We also have a child who is there. We think he is William Henry Kitzmiller, one of David and Mary's, Mrs. Kitzmiller's sons. But it struck me that kept happening so often that I have in Ghosts of Gettysburg 8, I have a chapter called Deja Vu. I have about probably 6 or 8 stories in there of the venues stay the same. The events, stories stay the same. Mm-hmm. But the people change. And this struck me because we got a phone call from a young woman who was living in a off-campus house with a bunch of other women. And she said, we have some really strange things going on here. Would you and your crew come out here and take a look and tell us if we're crazy or what's going on?
Right.
Well, she gave me the number of what is known as the Passmore House. The Passmore House is on the corner of Water and Carlisle Street in Gettysburg, and it's post Civil War, but I'd written about it before. In other words, all sorts of activity. One in particular was the sound of someone falling down the inside stairs, falling all the way down and landing on the,
Oh, wow.
doors opening and closing on their own. So we went over there, and I'm of course interested in the stories. Carol and Mary, our other medium that we use, went around trying to figure out why this is going on. And the stories I was getting from these young ladies were exactly the same as the stories I was hearing from the ladies that I interviewed 15 years ago. And they
Does that lead you to believe it's residual?
Yeah. First of all, it's probably residual. Okay. The doors and poltergeist too. The doors were slamming, and I was waiting for them to say something about a body falling down the stairs, and sure enough, towards the end of the interview, they talked about it and confirmed it with other people. The interesting thing is when you hear them say, "Well, I haven't ever told anybody about this, but here's what happened to me," and then another person in the room say, "That happened to you too? That happened to me." I mean, neither one wanted to talk about it, but they both had the same experience. So, yeah, I would say those pretty much are residual, very much like the Phantom Regiment out on the battlefield. That's residual. It's like it goes over and over and over again. Every time somebody sees it, the same thing happens. So,
so I will tell you that I went to Gettysburg the first time grudgingly. My mom said, "I want to go to Gettysburg. Nobody else wants to go with me." I'm like, "What's in Gettysburg?" At this time, I wasn't into the paranormal. I knew nothing about Gettysburg. I didn't go as a kid. You know, I was one of those people that had no idea. So I'm like, fine, I'll go. You know, and this was in 2007. The second we got there, it was instant. I felt like I was home for some reason. I don't know what happened. I stepped out of my car and I was like, oh my gosh. Like I fell in love with the place. And we were only there for 2 days. And I'm like, I don't want to leave. I got sad when we were leaving. I didn't want to go. So I immediately booked another trip, like for like 2 weeks out. I came back. And then I kept coming out. And at the time, again, wasn't into any of the paranormal stuff. I mean, my first trip, and my mom was, and she wanted to like have an experience. And I kept telling her, "You're crazy." I was like, "I don't want no parts of it." I'm like, "You do your thing. I'm going to do my thing," you know? But we were at the wheat field, and it was probably like 9:45, and you know you have to leave by 10. You know, and she's like, "I'm gonna go get out. I'm gonna walk on the. Do you want to come?" And I'm like, I'll be right here. It's too dark. I'm good." You know, and we were looking at each other, and I thought, and forgive me, but I thought she farted because all of a sudden this smell, and I was like, ew. I'm like, "Did you fart?" She's like, "I thought that was you." You know, and she's looking at me, and on her side of the door, on her window, there was boom, boom, boom. The glass shook. It was boom, 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 like somebody knocking. And I did not wait around to see what the heck it was. Like I took off. Like I was scared. My mom was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, I was like, had I known now what I know now, I would have tried to like at least interact. And then it wasn't until I took a ghost tour and I had that same experience you did almost, where half of my body was, I think they were using the temperature because I said, "This is the weirdest feeling I've ever had." And I, again, did it for my mom. She wanted to do the ghost tour. I was like, I'm freezing on this side. I'm hot on this side. And anytime that a man would approach me, it would go away. If I was standing by myself, or if like a woman got closer, it still stayed there. And one of the people running it, you know, asked a question like, "Do you like her?" And then when we listened back, you heard a man say, "I love her." I was like, "Well, you're going to stay here But afterwards, I was like, that wasn't so bad. That was pretty cool. In fact, I want to know more. I want to know how this is happening. I want to know more. So that's what started me into and then I walk in, then there you are. And I'm like, this is awesome. So I don't even know where I was going with that. I think I was just like saying, how, but then also like you had brought up East Cavalry, and East Cavalry, that was the first time that I really ever saw anything. And I was back behind the Jeb Stuart Monument, where that Pennsylvania monument is back there, the little one on the hill.
Right.
And I was there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that Pennsylvania, right?
That's third. I think you're talking about the third Pennsylvania monument.
Behind the real big, that's the Jeb.
The real tall one there is the Michigan monument.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm back there and I look over to the trees, and your mind, I always say this, I feel like, because everybody's like, don't you get scared? And I'm like, you don't have time to get scared, because before you realize what happened, it's over with. It's like so quick for me anyway. But I looked over and I thought there was a bird flying inside those bushes. The bushes weren't moving, nothing was and then as it was stopping, I could just picture, a soldier going in and looking like, who is that? What are they doing? Who is that? What are they doing? Like going in and out behind the bush. And then I have like 3 cameras hanging around my neck. I'm just standing there like, holy, what am I looking at? So, that was, I have found that most of my experiences there have been intelligent, which is surprising to me.
That's great. You're lucky. You're lucky.
Yeah. Yes. Especially in the park. Most of my experiences have all been intelligent. I was at the 20th Maine and not thinking, I just said, are you from Pennsylvania? Thinking globally. And my recorder says, no, Maine. And for me, I'm like, ooh, okay. So, all right, enough about me. All right, so let's talk about you. There's a couple of questions here. Can poltergeist activity be residual?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it can. It doesn't always appear to be a reaction to an individual. I mean, because I know that, for example, a couple of the places that have exhibited poltergeist activity are doing it regardless of who's there or whether they're interested in it. Lights go on and off, doesn't matter who's in the room. So yeah, I think poltergeist activity is very, very interesting, because it means that as ghosts, we would have the ability, the human consciousness would have the ability to do things to matter. Matter as in, a brick or something like that. Move things. That, I think at least 1 or 2 paranormalists have said that is a proof of life after death. If you can associate poltergeist activity with ghosts, which usually you can, because there's no obvious reason for something to be moving like that if you examine it, then that means something other than the physical is moving it, and that can only be consciousness energy. So poltergeist activity is very interesting to me, in that it is proof of something. The other thing that is interesting also is EVP, because you can start to get answers to questions. And the best part is when you ask a question and you get an answer you don't expect, because that means it can't possibly be your own mind somehow, which is really weird, but it could happen, I suppose. Your own
Oh,
mind impressing upon the tape or the digital recorder your thought.
yep.
Okay, and so you're not actually. It takes that out of the equation. So
Yeah.
I think
It's interesting that you
people.
say that because I have thought that because I love EVPs. I love recording. I love listening back. I do once in a while can hear, so when if I hear something, I've learned to just throw it out there, because I mean, at first, you're shy, you don't say things, but I've learned to throw it out there. And then when you listen back on the recorder and I say it the way I hear it, and then you hear it after I say it, that's validation for myself, um, but it's interesting that you say, but because I always think like, okay, if I'm really thinking about something, and I tried this with the Ouija board once, I'm like, I'm gonna like say an answer in my head over and over and over again, and it's gonna be the wrong answer, you know, um, and I'm gonna say it over and over, and that's what kind of worded out, So I said,
Mhm.
is this my mind doing this, or is it real, or is it picking up something inside, So I agree with you there. There's like a chance that's a possibility, you know.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think there should be more experimentation
Yeah, for
in the
sure.
field. We're not really doing a whole. And when I say experimentation, I mean as much as you can with the scientific method, you can't really. Um, the results cannot always be reproducible. You can't get the ghost. I mean, it's
Yeah,
like herding cats. You can't get the ghost to do what you want them to do.
right.
But which is one of the reasons why I like collecting the stories like this, and especially the deja vu, because you get enough stories, then all of a sudden you have data. For example, only about 10% of all my stories that I've collected, and this is well over 1,000 stories, not all of them are published. Only about 10% of my stories are visuals. Very rare. 65% are auditory.
Hmm.
That's the most common experience, at least in Gettysburg. And the rest cover all the senses, sense of smell, like you experienced. Now, you do know what that was from. It wasn't human. It was the one of the things that people talk about on our ghost tours is they smell rotten eggs,
Yeah, that's what it smelled like.
and they couldn't figure out what it was. And I explained to them, well, that's part of the main propellant, black powder, in the
Hmm.
Civil War is sulfur. And if you ever go to a reenactment and go to the camp afterwards, you'll smell it because it just permeates the clothing and everything, that smell of sulfur, and it smells like rotten eggs. And that, I think, is what you smelled out there in the battlefield. That's what people smell on our tours. They're probably blaming their kid or something, or the
Yes.
dog. But
It's interesting to bring that because I do go to the reenactments. I go every year. Um, I'm sure they have experiences, even
oh yeah.
though even though they're technically not in the park. You know what I mean? They're still at a farm in Gettysburg, but they have to. I mean, they're that's almost like a live. I don't want to say provoking because that's not a bad provoking, right? They're not doing it for that purpose. It's like this. I mean, do you hang out there and just wait? Like, I would just hang out there and be like, all right, let's go. What's gonna happen?
Well,
It's almost like it's
after the movie Gettysburg was filmed here, and they spent some of these guys spent 2.5 months there. I got a letter from a guy who had spent a month or so, a guy from California, so he was out there for a while. He sent me a 13-page letter just of notes of things that happened out at the encampment. And when I say notes, I'm like, well, one paragraph, 13 pages
wow.
of everything.
Oh,
And
I'm gonna mute myself.
can you still hear me? Okay.
He
Okay.
sees somebody walking by and he's got to
Oh,
make a big
oh, he's protecting
Bubba.
me. We have two. We have two here that do that.
He's
So,
one.
what that means to me is and I could be wrong, but what it means to me is that we not only can we see them periodically when they when they decide to be show themselves, they can see us too, and they're familiar. They are familiar with guys dressed like they are. Um, they smell the bacon cooking. They smell the coffee cooking, the campfires. So they feel comfortable and start walking into the camp. And then all of a sudden, the reenactors do something, and the guys, the ghosts are like, "Whoops, maybe I shouldn't be here." So I think that tells us a good bit about the ghosts themselves and what properties they may have. The fact that they can actually see us. So I think that's interesting.
I think about that because one smell that I smelled, and I didn't know why I smelled this, but I smelled almost like a syrup. A syrup. I was coming off of the 20th Main, the path there, and I smelled syrup, and I had no idea why. And I say that because that's what it smells like. I don't know if that's exactly what it was, but my senses when I smelled it, that's what I thought of. Hold on one second.
Sure.
Okay, I apologize. I'm sorry.
No problem.
So that, yeah, that is the one thing, was syrup was a weird thing to me. And again, I don't know why. So I'm looking up, what, and then I did read that some of the soldiers would use sap from the trees to close wounds. But I don't know if that's what I would smell. I don't know if that's the smell that I was smelling or what. I don't know why. It was so strong. Nobody else with me smelled it. And I knew that's what I was smelling. Like it was just very strange to me, and then there was, what else did you say? You said the smells.
Well, a lot of people will smell a sweet smell in town of when they're going on our tours. They'll smell like rose water or lilac water. And that's one of the things that they ask about. Why would I smell that? And the answer to that, if there's a historic connection, is that right after the battle, the smell of decomp was so bad. You have 51,000 wounded out there, wounded and killed. Maybe 8,000 dead on the battlefield, 5,000 dead horses. You can't even imagine what the smell was like. And all I would have to do is the wind would change a little bit, and you couldn't escape it. So what the women took to doing is soaking their handkerchiefs in rose water or lilac water. And when that smell would come at them, they would, clap it up against their nose and finish their, I'll take 2 tomatoes, I'll take, a head of cabbage. So, life doesn't stop. You just have to deal with it. And so when people smell that old fashioned perfume, the lilac water, rose water, and there's no real source for it, it may be paranormal.
Oh yeah, I remember I was walking through there, and that, and again, your senses, I think, associate with things, but I was getting that, like that, that weird, I want to paoli, whatever that is that people wear. It's that distinct, like.
Oh, patchouli.
Patchouli, that's it. Did I say paoli?
That's outside of Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia.
Yeah. So I smelled that once, and that was down by when you go past Culp's, you're on Culp's Hill, but behind the when you go down the little path behind the lookout tower, I have had quite a bit of experiences there, and that's where I was smelling that. And that I don't think was around then. So I have no idea what I say. That could have been something, through the wind or the air or something like that, because I couldn't, make sense of that. But also, that's what I wanted to say. You were saying like being watched. When I go to the New Jersey monument, the one that is on the hill, real big, tall one, sits
Right.
back. That is the only place where I feel like I'm being watched. Whenever I
Hmm.
go, I feel like there are just there. Like I feel like when I'm up there, it's they're curious. What are you doing here? Why, it's like all these just very inquisitive and just watching and watching. And it's not an uneasy feel, it's
Right.
more like I want to communicate. Like I feel like I want to say, hey, like talk to me, um, you don't have to be inquisitive. You ask me, I ask you. Let's do this.
Yeah.
you know?
I often wonder. So many people tell me that they feel like they've been here before, Gettysburg,
Mhm,
that they have been drawn to the place, like you. And
mhm.
sometimes I wonder, is this also could this be a proof? What the feelings that we have of reincarnation?
Yeah,
A lot of reenactors insist that they are reincarnated and lived in the time of the Civil War, and perhaps others. But yeah, that's another explanation for some of this stuff too.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are millions of people. I thought I had something wrong with me until social media, until like you start to find that there's so many people out there, thousands of that feel the same way I do about Gettysburg. Like it's their home. They feel like, they don't want to
Oh
leave,
yeah,
um and it's amazing to me. It has to be there's something there, that just, and for me, if I honestly feel like I'm home when I'm there, and when I leave, I literally cry. And the longer I stay, the worse it is to leave. If I'm there, I'll come sometimes for a week by myself, and I just go out there and I'm walking around the park. I do my thing. 8 days, the eighth day, I'm literally bawling in my hotel room, like I don't want to go. Like I don't want to go, crying my eyes out.
well,
Um,
there are a lot of it may or may not be that you were a soldier there. Maybe you were a townsperson. We
yeah,
want to blame everything on the soldiers. It's obviously it's a soldier ghost, but we know that there are ghosts from the town as well who
absolutely.
remain there. We have some in our building. The town itself was battlefield, so there were soldiers that were shot down right there on the streets of Gettysburg. So, in fact, one of the hidden haunted hotspots is going to be talking about one of the battlefields in town, and the fact that there was the soldiers were caught behind this one main road, and they saw their only escape was into this fenced in yard. But when they got in there, they saw the other end of the yard the gate was clogged up with bodies of soldiers that had tried to get out of there and were shot down, and so they turned around and went the other way. So
Wow.
this is right in town. So you talk about 97,000 Union soldiers, 75,000 Confederates. That's probably low
Amazing.
because you had, you know, body servants, you had teamsters. Those are just the fighting men. You had teamsters, you had farriers, you had cooks, you had,
Hmm.
and they're all dead now.
Yeah.
And so they can come back, all of them, anytime
Yeah.
they want.
Yeah. Um, Mark, do you have any plans to write a book about your headquarters in Gettysburg? The best EVP I ever gotten was there in a little room downstairs at the back. Still freaks me out because it wasn't in response to a question. It explained a movement I made.
Yeah, and hi, Colleen. How are you doing? I have a story about her and her sister sometimes about the about remote viewing, which is very interesting. But um, yeah, the I don't know where you. I guess you weren't here when I talked about the other books that I have getting ready to come out: Ghosts of Gettysburg 8, and also Hidden Haunted Hotspots of Gettysburg. So yeah, there are going to be some more books.
They're awesome books. All your books are awesome. I love them.
You.
And I'm not a good reader, meaning I have ADD really, really bad. And then maybe it's because it's Gettysburg. Maybe it's because, but your books are awesome. They're good reads. I mean, the information in there is great. I mean, I love it.
Thank you. Thanks.
So here's another question. Does Mark think that geology of Gettysburg lends itself to the paranormal activity, meaning the geology acts like a recorder?
I was first introduced to this by a fellow several years ago, and that was his theory before I read anywhere about it. But if you look at the geology of Gettysburg, which I have, you realize that there's a lot of granite in the area. It's not only on the battlefield, obvious in the stone walls, Devil's Den, but if you come into town, you also see that most of the houses have this field stone granite for their foundations. If you look at the brick that is being used in some of the older buildings, that salmon colored brick, the pinkish brick, orangish brick, that was the clay for that was mined out in the fields of Gettysburg, and that is filled with that granite. Now, granite is filled with quartz. Okay, and this fellow's idea was maybe the quartz is recording all this stuff, and I thought that's kind of, I don't know, how could that be? But I did some more research, and I found out that a Polish physicist, was during behind the Iron Curtain, was doing some experiments on people as they died, and he realized that when we die, there's a burst of photons 1,000 times more than when we're living.
Oh, wow.
Just as we die, a burst of photons. That's electrical energy and electromagnetic energy. Now, you had all these guys dying. You had also limbs being amputated or shot, and that bones will give off a piezoelectric electricity. All right, you have all this electricity, electromagnetism flying out of all these guys, thousands and thousands of times over, and you have all this quartz all around. I still thought that was kind of goofy until I realized that quartz is what we are using to talk right now.
Right.
The little chip, silicon, quartz. That's exactly what we're using. Our quartz watches, those are affected by electricity. So it obviously is affected. It probably, the quartz probably retains the electromagnetic energy. The question is, if I want to get something back from my computer, I just hit a button. But what button do we push to get that quartz to release what it has stored in it? And I don't know. We don't have that magic.
I mean, would we ever have that? I mean, it's just, I don't know. I mean, that would be, could you imagine?
Yeah, I think some people do. I think some people can. They can see these things and hear these things. I know very sensitive people can. So maybe that's the key is to get more people involved, more people that are sensitive involved.
Yeah. Besides being by moving water, any ideas why the Eisenhower Bridge is so active?
Well, that if you talk about Sachs Bridge, yes.
Well, I think there's so the one that if you walk past and people have dubbed it Suicide Bridge for some reason, but I agree with Leslie. I always call it the Eisenhower Bridge because I don't believe in I don't believe in like the legends. I don't call it like the Suicide Bridge. I call it Eisenhower Bridge. But a lot of people call it that other thing, which but so that's what she's referring to, the Eisenhower Bridge past Sachs Bridge.
I'm going to say it's probably the water, and probably also the fact that the area. I really haven't studied in particular that area, but that whole area was covered with soldiers. It was a I don't know. I don't want to say it's a hospital site, because I know there was a hospital site by the Sachs Bridge, the wooden bridge there.
Yes.
But, I mean, soldiers were all over there. You can't get away from it. They were, every place in Gettysburg.
Everywhere. Yeah.
So,
everywhere.
And wounded soldiers came back to that area, stopped there because there was water, because after battle, you're very, very thirsty. So, I don't know if there's one particular reason why, whether it's the metal. I know the water definitely has energy in it, which is often borrowed by the spirits.
Well, I could imagine that they didn't just, sit on Sachs Bridge, or, I'm sure they traveled, everywhere to either go or come or camp or leave. I mean,
well, they're people. They were people too. I mean,
yeah.
and if you're marching in a column for hours, and all of a sudden you get to your campsite, first thing you do is go and find water somewhere. So a bunch of guys would run off and they find the nearest water, fill their buddies' canteens. Other guys are building little fires because they virtually lived on coffee back then. So there was a lot of activity, and you didn't just stay in one place. They wandered all over the place. So.
Somebody is saying, I don't know what this means. So maybe I don't know. Laser light will release it either in sound waves or light waves. I think he's talking about the quartz. If correct me, Alfred, if I'm wrong.
Yeah. Well, we need to experiment on that then a little bit, and he obviously has a little more scientific knowledge than I do. I'm an English major and a historian, so. But that's something we can work on. I don't think anyone's ever tried that on the rocks at Devil's Den. You know what I mean? Or the rock walls at the angle of the Pickett's Charge. So might be something to think about, to try and do it. It would be unobtrusive. It's not like taking a metal detector out there or anything. So.
Right. Which, if you own property there, you can do that. But yeah. What would you say is your most and it doesn't have to be Gettysburg. I know we're talking about Gettysburg, but what would you say would be your most profound paranormal experience that you had? I mean, the hit you in the face, kind of just floored you, left you speechless, that you personally had.
Okay, yeah, it is Gettysburg, and it's really the strangest, most unexplainable thing that's ever happened to me. It was several years ago now, that Daniel Lady Farm. I don't know if you've ever been there or not. Daniel Lady Farm was a Confederate field hospital. The operating room was the front room. An organization I belonged to for 18 years. I was on their board for 18 years. Gettysburg Battlefield Preservation Association purchased that, and they restored it to its original Civil War look, which meant taking up all these carpets and everything. One of the things they found out was that there were blood stains on the wood floors in the front room, and a lot of blood stains.
Wow.
And they realized this was probably the operating room because it had southern exposure. You got the sunlight in it. So one day I got a phone call from the caretaker out there. He said, "Mark, if you want to see a paranormal experience going on in front of your very eyes, come on out to the farm." Who's going to pass that up, right? Through the
Yes.
through the gear in the van, off I go. And I walked into the house with my video camera going, so it's all time stamped and everything. And I walked in and I said, "What's going on?" He said, "I'm not going to say anything. All I can say is everything was cleaned up yesterday, so that we could tour this place with some people. But I'm not going to say anything. You just go on into that operating room." So we walked in, and I was looking around. I looked down on the floor, and there were five or 6 foot streams of liquid, of a
Oh, wow.
rust colored liquid on the floor. And I could see that there was some like clear stuff on the side of it and some drops all around that looked like they were starting to crystallize. And I immediately looked at the ceiling. I said, Tom, what did a pipe break? Is this rusty water? He said, Mark, that just showed up. He said,
Oh,
this
wow.
morning I walked in, it was there. No pipes in nowhere. I said, what? So I don't know what. I was there for 25 minutes. I said, do you have a tissue? He said, sure. So I soaked some up in a tissue. He said, I got to get out of here. I got work to do out in the fields. I have no idea what I'm going to do. I said, okay. So he takes off. I take off. 3 or 4 hours later, I get a phone call. It's him again. He said, Mark, it's gone.
Wow.
I said, what? What do you mean it's gone? He said, it's disappeared. I came back from working out in the fields. So out I go with my camera going again. And I walked in there and it was gone. It was, and he said, it was right here. I got a video of him putting his hand down. It's right here, right? He says, what the hell? You look, his fingertips are covered in dust, a thin layer of dust, right where the liquid was. Carol was there, my wife, and she said, I wonder if the sample disappeared, the sample that we took.
Oh, wow.
She went on to the van, and it was still intact.
Oh, wow.
Now, the GBPA was very well connected, so they sent this off, and 3 weeks later, the analysis came back. The rust-colored liquid was blood. The species was human.
Wow.
Did I walk into a reverse? I don't know.
Holy moly.
Weirdest thing that's ever happened.
That's amazing.
Weirdest thing that ever happened.
That's amazing.
How do I explain it?
Look,
I don't.
Somebody said amazing. You can't even, how do you?
I don't know. Well, the strange part about it is that there were blood stains from 150 years before all over this room, but nothing where that blood was.
Wow. And you guys, wow, that's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah. No explanation, but that's what happened.
Does Mark know of Old Brownie at Sexbridge?
Nope.
Yeah.
Unless Old Brownie is the name for something that I have heard of, but we've called it something different. But
right. He said he stays on the right trail near the dam.
Okay,
I never heard that.
I'm familiar with that trail and the dam and everything, but no, and then people, I know that ghosts have been seen going up and down that trail, lights and things like that. So maybe one is a little more common down there, and people have seen them and identified them. That could be. That could be.
Lady Farm main house up in the rafters in the attic remains some battle damage from arterial shell impact.
You might be thinking about the barn, because yes, definitely, there in the barn you can see a piece of shrapnel still stuck in one of the rafters up there. Now there may be damage up in the attic. I never saw it, but there is definitely a piece of shell that got hit into the rafters so hard you can't even move it.
Right.
Churches in Gettysburg, I saw. There is the one church that had that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's one church in Gettysburg that they literally had to drill holes in the floor to let the blood run down into the basement so they could continue to operate.
Oh, wow. I never heard that story.
Yeah, that's the old German Reformed church.
Wow.
Down from the borough building.
Question. Yeah. He didn't hear? I thought you heard it. He said amazing. So I thought he did get it tested. It was human blood, but I don't know the rest. I don't know if they were able to.
I don't know if they could or not. It looked fresh to me. It's one of those situations where you don't. you don't want to call in the police because you might be leaving in handcuffs just for just to be questioned, about the amount of, because it was a huge amount of blood.
It's so crazy. I mean, I think, I understand why he would ask the age thing, but at the very fact that neither of you are bleeding out, nobody was there bleeding out. He's like, I don't know what's happening. You're like, let me take a sample. It's gone, because to clean up something like that, everybody's saying here that there's places still in Gettysburg that still have the stains. So to get blood out of wooden floors and to get blood off of walls, you'd have to replace floorboards almost.
Well, nobody cleaned it up because you can't get that out of wood. There were blood stains 10 feet from it that were there for 150 years. Poor Mrs. Lady probably worked really, really hard to try and get those blood stains out, and they wouldn't go. So,
are there any reports of activity in the visitor center because of all of the relics?
Oh, I don't know. I don't have the juice I once had in Gettysburg, with it not being in the park.
Oh, stop it.
So
I refuse to believe that.
I haven't talked to any of the park rangers, but they probably wouldn't tell me anyhow, because, in my second book, I have a whole chapter on the Eisenhower farm, and I usually like to at least acknowledge the people or footnote the people who told me the stories. And all the stories, none of the stories have any footnotes to them, and the reason is because they all came from park rangers, and they said, "Mark, I'll tell you this, but don't tell anybody where you got it."
I heard this. I actually heard the park rangers won't talk about it. They don't talk about, I guess maybe to you they might, you know what I mean? Because, they know. What about the police? Do the police ever have any experiences that you've heard of? Have they?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have several stories in there by the borough police.
Oh my gosh. I just need to move to Gettysburg. I would be on your team. I would go out. I would just love every second of being there, for more than just the paranormal side of things. But that's just unavoidable. They go hand in hand. I used to see this meme that would pop up. It would say, Gettysburg, a historic town with a ghost problem.
Yeah. Yeah, that
right?
could be. Yeah.
Let me see. I was going to ask, the park rangers, that was interesting because I always heard that the park rangers, like if you were to ask them questions, they wouldn't really talk about it. They don't act like, that they've experienced anything. But to me, there was
we were actually told when I was a park ranger, people would come in and ask, are there any ghosts here at Gettysburg? And we were actually told by our bosses, tell them no, there are no ghosts at Gettysburg, and we, just tell them that there's nothing going on, which is interesting because I always say if the government's denying it, there must be something to it.
Right?
Right? But
yes, absolutely.
So, it went on back then. So,
yeah. Did you ever hear the story about, even during the Civil War on Little Round Top, that there were some Union soldiers that reported seeing a man that looked like George Washington?
Actually, that story comes from, it's one of the earliest stories of the Battle of Gettysburg, and it comes from the soldiers themselves. And it's from the 5th Corps. Even Joshua Chamberlain heard that story the night of July 1st, 1863. What happened is that they had just gotten into camp after a long day's march, and all of a sudden word came, look, there was a big battle just a few miles. They were outside of Hanover, just a few miles from here. We got to, saddle up and head on out. So the men started on a night march, and they're marching along, and all of a sudden this weird rumor came back across, through the marching column, and the rumor was that they'd see a horseman up ahead of them, up ahead of all the officers and everything. He would ride off until they couldn't see him anymore, and then all of a sudden they'd catch up to him, and then he'd ride off again. and they started getting a glimpse of him, started getting recognize him, and getting a description of him. He wore a cape.
Mm-hmm.
He had a tricorn hat, and then all of a sudden the guys realized that guy's from another era, and that's George Washington leading us into battle. And they kind of took that as a good omen. Of course, these were Union soldiers, and of course, Washington was a Virginian.
Right.
So,
Doesn't make sense.
but still, he was father of his country. So they felt that was a good omen, and that's one of the first ghost stories that's ever been about the Battle of Gettysburg.
Now, I never heard the details of it. I never heard the details of it. I just heard that Union soldiers on Little Round Top had reported seeing a spirit, on a horse that looked like George Washington, but I never heard the details of it. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, the Fifth Corps, including Joshua Chamberlain, who'd heard about this, ended up on Little Round Top.
Right.
And that's where they ended up.
So this is before they got there.
This is the night before, as they're marching into Gettysburg.
Oh, that's what you said, July 1st. Wow.
Yeah.
Let me see here. So now what about, there's another area that everybody tends to flock to in Gettysburg, Triangular Field. I personally have never had any experiences in the places that everybody says the most haunted. I have not. I've spent time in Triangular Field. I've spent time in the Sarah Black room at the Farnsworth, because that's supposedly the most haunted room there. Devil's Den, I mean, aside from maybe feeling some things, I never really experienced anything there. Mine's always the off the beaten path places, Have you ever experienced anything at the Triangular Field?
That was actually the first place I ever got EVP.
Really?
In the Triangular Field. And I actually, after I got that first EVP, of course, I was stunned because, someone told me how to do it. Catherine Ramsland, as a matter of fact, who was doing her book Ghost, was interviewing me for that whole weekend, and we went out there to try it, and I felt kind of silly, because you get out there and you say, "Is there anybody here with me? Any Confederate soldiers here with me?" And you sit, you stand there and you can't hear anything, but all of a sudden you see your recorder start going, and I'm like, "Whoa, what's going on here?" And I got some answers. I wrote a book called 35 Days to Gettysburg. It's a history book. But it was about a unit that actually fought through the Triangular Field, 15th Georgia. Oh. And the fella that I was writing about was actually, I don't want to spoil the end of the story. At any rate, so I was very familiar with this unit. In fact, I found out in the back of the book, I listed the guys who were wounded and the guys who were killed at Gettysburg. So one night I actually called the 15th Georgia to attention to muster for pay. Soldiers aren't going to miss that.
No.
And I started calling off their names, and I got noises. I got noises after almost every name. So that was pretty interesting, but it was actually addressing the actual men by name who were either killed or wounded in that Triangular Field. So that was a pretty interesting experiment, and I got results.
That's positive. Awesome. That's awesome. I like I said, I didn't start getting into the paranormal for a couple of years, but for some reason I'm drawn to Gettysburg. Gettysburg is, so I literally, when I go there, I have both of my passions. I'm a paranormal investigator. I love this stuff, the unknown, and then it's Gettysburg. To me, Gettysburg, I'm a very patriotic person. So for me, Gettysburg is also the heartbeat of this nation. I mean, it's there's so much patriotism in that town still. It just lingers, and so to feel both of those at the same time, just feeling the energy and, this and that. And I'm a huge Chamberlain fan, love Chamberlain. So, it just feels like, like home. Somebody's saying Triangular Field was a very concentrated area of death, First Texas, a young officer. Yeah. Yeah, I unfortunately, I mean, I haven't spent a lot of time at Triangular Field though, but I have not, I haven't experienced really anything there. Like for some reason I'm drawn to East Calvary. I don't know why I'm drawn there. I'm drawn there. Like the places off the beaten path, where, it's just,
Right.
I had a question. Have you ever investigated the college?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I get a
So
lot of good
lucky.
stories from the college.
Ugh. Wait, so was it the original college or like,
Well,
where
there were only like 3 buildings at the college at the time of the battle. The
right.
biggest one, of course, was Old Dorm or Pennsylvania Hall. The other was the
Mhm.
President's House, and then there was Linnaean Hall, which was in between the two of them. So there was a lot of open field out there, and I've gotten stories from the college. It's almost never ending out there. The stories that I get. One of the first stories I heard was when they were building Musselman Library, which is behind Old Dorm. That area used to be called Stein Lake. It was a depressed area, and the kids used to go out when it rained and fill up with water, and they'd slosh around and play football in it and get all messy and dirty and everything. And what they didn't realize is that Stein Lake was probably depressed because there were, when you have a hospital as big as Old Dorm, you have to bury the bodies and the limbs somewhere. Okay. And a number of them were buried out there and then exhumed. And then that's where you get the depressions from. But that's where they decided to build Musselman Library. And now Gettysburg College, colleges don't want to talk too much about this, but Gettysburg College had a problem because they were digging the basement for the place, and the men would be coming out of that hole and saying, "I'm not going back in there. It's weird in there." And so they finally brought a priest in, even though it's a good Lutheran college. Maybe they brought a minister in. I don't know. Someone had to bless it before these guys would work down there anymore. And you have stories about about Brew Hall, which is a theater. Theaters are always haunted. You have stories about Pennsylvania Hall. You have a story about one of the halls there called Stevens Hall about the Blue Boy, and he's been seen a number of times.
Well, somebody just wrote something. They said, "Mark, I have a pic with your guide Amanda and the Blue Boy."
Okay,
That was that. He put that up before you started talking about before you said the Blue Boy. I was just
yeah,
waiting for you to finish so I could put it.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. I talked to Amanda this past weekend. I'm not. I'll have to ask her about that. But yeah, we had my daughter Katie was working one night, and this is within the last 2 years. Of course, the Blue Boy story goes back 100 years or so, the original, and she and we had heard someone had come in and said they saw the Blue Boy. Well, this young couple comes in, and 2 weeks later, and she says to Katie, she says, are they still seeing the Blue Boy on campus? They were 2 students, and Katie said, well, yeah, just about a week ago we had somebody. So she turns around and punches her boyfriend in the arm. She said, I told you I saw him. So she had seen him, but the boyfriend was making fun of her. He said he doesn't hang around, so.
He said he's going to send you a copy of it.
Oh, great. Okay. Terrific.
So you don't live in Gettysburg, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. You live in Maryland?
Yes, in outside of Baltimore.
How often do you get to Gettysburg? Like, do you go to Gettysburg very often to, do more investigations or, interview people or get stories or,
Yes. We get up there probably, especially during the season, just about every weekend because our daughter and grandchildren live there, and Carol will fill in periodically to uh, to help Kayla work there, and I'll autograph. Usually, definitely on busy Saturday nights like Fourth of July weekend,
Yeah.
Memorial Day weekend, definitely.
Yeah.
But if I don't have anything to do, I'll sign on a Saturday night on many weekends once the season gets going.
Yeah. Um, so this Friday, I so you guys know I will be going live. I'll be going live on Paranormal Brew, and I'll share it onto YouTube if it's permitting. Mark, I won't go live if you don't want me to. I
Fine
totally
with me.
respect I totally respect your space.
Fine with
But
me.
I will be investigating Ghosts of Gettysburg store. Pam and Steve Barry, who are very good friends of mine, who share the back side of Mark's store. It's Gettysburg Ghost Exchange. They've given permission for us to investigate in there. And so it'll be me and Kayla Miner. I think it's just me and her actually. I think we're just like gonna investigate, and so I will be going live. Everybody can join in and help out with that. Um, but is there anything big coming up for you? You say you have 2 books coming out.
Yeah, well, I have the books that are coming out. Ghost of Gettysburg 8. I'm sorry, Ghost of Gettysburg
9.
9. Ghost of
Yeah.
Gettysburg already out. Uh, Hidden Haunted Hotspots of Gettysburg is another one that'll be coming out. We have an app that just came out a few months ago of the battlefield tour. In other
Mm.
words, I narrate the ghost stories of the battlefield, and you can drive using this app through the battlefield itself.
Oh,
So
that's
those
so
are all
cool.
new stories besides the ones, our tours can't go out on the battlefield, but you can take this app out there and follow that around. Um, and now also one thing we're offering because of the COVID thing are private tours. If people are nervous about going out with um, a bunch of people, which seems to be pretty safe anymore, if they're nervous about that, they can book a private tour as well. So we have several different options there, and that's pretty much it for the coming season. We will keep everyone posted about on our website about what's going on. The website, of course, is ghostsofgettysburg.com. It's a plural because somebody else took Ghost of Gettysburg, but it's ghostsofgettysburg.com.
Wait a minute. What? Wait. What? Somebody else has Ghosts of Gettysburg?
One which just without the S, it's Ghost of Gettysburg. I don't,
Who
how people.
would do that?
I don't know.
There's only one. There's the original. You're the OG of Gettysburg.
Well,
Like you can't do that.
we're ghosts of Gettysburg. In other words, more than
Oh
one.
man, are they
Yeah,
totally
ghosts
trying
of
to?
Gettysburg. So
Oh, that's
it's
just like
kind of
that's horrible.
that
Um,
happened.
I have a quick question. I know I've had you for an hour and 25 minutes already. Please thank Carol so much. I'm sure she's, ready to murder me. But well, actually two, and one that does involve her. The first one is I just saw this. Have you ever gotten anybody contact you telling you that they've had experiences other than spirits? Has it been aliens, Bigfoot? Anything like that anybody has maybe reported?
Well, I know Patty Wilson, my co-author on a couple of my books, has some stories about UFOs over Gettysburg.
Oh.
Okay, so there have been UFOs sighted, not associated with the battle and during that period, but they have definitely been sighted over Gettysburg. And actually, I saw one over Gettysburg one night. It was very far away. It was very strange, and I looked up in the sky. I was with my son, and we're watching this star going very, very fast. I mean, it was passing everything. I said, "Look, that might be the space station." And we're
Mhm.
watching it, and all of a sudden, it did a 90-degree turn and started heading in a completely different angle. And I looked at him. I said, "Whoops!" I said, "I don't think that's the space station. That's something different."
Wow. I do go to
So,
Gettys. I go to Gettysburg to watch meteor showers because, being from Jersey, there's all this light, but the meteor showers, like the one in August, it's the Perseids meteor shower. I'll go there to watch, and I just lay out there, and I'm like, oh, you
oh
see all
yeah,
these meteors, you know. But that's
yeah.
that's interesting. I know. My mom and my sister were there one time, and they were walking back down Big Round Top. And at the time, again, this was way before I went, so I was thinking my mom had a little bit too much to drink, even though she didn't drink. Like in my head, I'm like, yeah, okay. But they were walking back down Big Round Top, and the noise they described that they heard. They both were freaked out about it. They said that they heard this like scream, screech, growl, all mixed into one. And they were walking down Big Round Top, and they said as soon as they heard it, they said they've never heard anything like it before. They don't know what it could have been. Um, and I think as human beings, we, even when you're listening to EVPs, I say this all the time, there's a difference between a human voice and a spirit voice. There's a difference. Even if a human were to whisper, there's a difference.
Right.
So, I mean, could there be an explanation? Maybe, but like they have no idea what this animal could have been. So, so they're associating it with a Bigfoot. They're saying because the claim is that they you hear this like crazy growl sound. Now, at the time, they didn't know that. It was only after they were like, "Oh, what animal makes this big, weird, loud, crazy scream?" Googling and trying to figure out what the heck it was that they possibly could have been around. Because in Gettysburg, I've never really seen a lot of wildlife. The only time I've ever seen really a lot of wildlife is when that one year it was like 112 degrees and there was like a drought. And I remember seeing fox, and I was like giving them all water, and I was trying
Mhm.
to, because it didn't rain for like a week and a half. So it was like really,
Right.
that's the only time that I've ever really seen a lot of wildlife there, you know?
Well, only anything big. Only a few times, periodically, they'll talk about a black bear coming through the park. Okay, where he's going, I don't know, but they seem to be crossing the park. And the nearest Bigfoot tracks, I think, were seen near Waynesboro. Okay, out in towards the mountains there, and we do have mountains fairly close to Gettysburg, so it's not like
Yeah,
it's in the country,
right.
so a lot of open space out there.
Gettysburg is a fun town. I hate when people are like, "What's there to do in Gettysburg?" Oh, it's like the best town ever. Like it's just so fun. There's always stuff going on. The stores, the people that live there are amazing. You would think going to a tourist town that people that live there would be sick of the tourists all the time because it's year round. But no, you walk in the stores and they're so welcoming. They're like, "Where are you from?" Now, I don't consider myself a tourist because I'm there so much. And I've made friends out there. I stay with my friends, I'm like, but I still act like a tourist. I still do the touristy stuff. I buy Gettysburg stuff, I go into your store every time I'm in town, but it is truly, it's just this little, it's the best town ever,
Well,
you
like I
know.
like to say, Gettysburg is very user friendly.
Yes. Yes, it is. It is. I mean, I mean, like it's so. I mean, they have bars there. They have stuff for kids there. I mean, it's just everything, and
Oh yeah.
yeah, and I'm really looking forward to, um, COVID just letting Gettysburg get back to normal. you know, and having their festivals and having their reenactments and having all the stuff, the ghost tours and the investigations and, you know, just being normal. And you know what? I have been there. I went there all year last year and it didn't hinder my trip. You know what I mean? Like I still had an amazing time, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's loosening up a little bit. You know, you see people, some people without masks outside. The indoor dining is opening up now, so that's good. And of
Yeah.
course, our tours, you know, we're basically running the same as we always have because, you know, people can wear masks if they want. They can stay in their own little group and still hear the stories. And like I said, we can offer private tours as well. So
Um, so are you, so if you don't want to answer this, that's fine. But I'm just going to ask, because uh, I'm just curious. There are two paranormal events that happen in Gettysburg. One hadn't happened for a long time. It's coming back this year, and then you have the Gettysburg Battlefield Bash, right? Pam and Steve. That's in August. So the first one is phenomenology, and then the other one is Gettysburg Battlefield Bash. Will you be at either?
I will be at the bash.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. It'd be I don't think I missed one, or maybe the first one I missed, but yes, I will definitely be at the bash. The phenomenology, I don't know. I haven't been invited, so you know,
Oh, I'm gonna have to
yeah,
tell Dana.
yeah.
I mean, you are the epiphany of paranormal of Gettysburg. Like, I feel like, you know, I just,
Well, I think she
you know,
gets a lot of people from out of. I think she gets a lot of people from out of town. You know, so you know the guys on TV and stuff like that. So I've been on TV in 15 years, so I'm kind of.
however, well, the store was on because of the picture that one of your residents got, right? I mean, she got a picture of the little boy or the little kid, right? I saw that
Yeah,
episode.
yeah. That was Jeff Ritzman who got that picture. He did a wonderful job getting that. They had to kind of outsmart the ghost. You know, the
Yeah.
kids were playing with him, you know, with different noises all over, but he finally figured it out.
Yeah. Um, well, I will be at the bash and I'll be at phenomenology. And I am going to say something to Dana. I'm friends with her and she needs to like maybe just scoot you in there somewhere.
Well, it depends on when it is. You know, I get busy all through the summer, so but at any rate, you know, whatever. But
um, somebody said I know Jeff, he's a good guy. Mark, I so appreciate you have to come back on again. I mean, like, you know, like an hour with Mark Nesbitt is just not, well, actually an hour and a half. Oh, that was the other thing I want to ask real quick. Carol, was she
yes,
always into this? Was she always into like, I mean, like, you know, how did you know, did you guys meet after, or is this kind of just like a you and her thing, you know, got into
well,
it?
that's one of those funny stories which we may have to wait till next time to tell the whole thing. But at any rate, Carol went to college at Gettysburg College.
Oh, she's so lucky.
Yeah, and we knew each other back then, and then she got married, and they hadn't seen her for 20 years, and then all of a sudden she showed up at one of my signings, and one thing led to another, and she got a divorce. It wasn't because of me,
Right, right,
but
right.
yeah, she got a divorce, and we got together again, and things worked out. So she just kind of she's interesting because she was a biology major, which
Mhm.
is all straight line stuff. She was in computers for a long time in retail, so that was all straight line stuff. And then we started dating, and all of a sudden she kind of got into the paranormal. And the thing that is the most amazing about it is that she realized that she had some talents in the paranormal. She's not psychic, she's not a medium, but you should see her using dowsing rods and pendulums. She found some grave sites that we didn't know were there,
Oh,
and
wow.
actually empty graves where the energy was still there. So she's pretty talented in her own right when it comes to the paranormal.
That's awesome. That is awesome. I love that you guys do it together. I love that she's a part of it. I'm telling you, I love the whole thing. I just love it. And I'm so happy that you have a store. Somebody said, love your books. The ghost tours are really interesting. Yeah. And I'm
Thank
just
you.
going to put a disclaimer out there. There are a lot of ghost tours in Gettysburg, but if you want one that is, you know, a really, really good one. My recommendation, every time I send people to Gettysburg and they ask me, I send them to you. And if they want to do like a ghost hunt and stuff, I say, you have the Ghosts of Gettysburg. They do the ghost tours. They have like little kids and they want to whatever. And then if they're trying to do an investigation, I send them to Ghost Exchange. Pam and Steve. They do those. Legit like overnights and in the orphanages or at
Right.
you know so I send everybody to you guys. I'm like, you
Thank
guys
you.
are
Appreciate it.
highly, highly, I respect you, and Pam and Steve and everything that you guys do, and because you guys really research and really are in this for the right reasons, as opposed to, I want to be on TV, I just want to make money, I just want to do this. You're in this for the research, and
Yeah.
to try and get answers, which is, you really find that anymore since it's gone mainstream. So
Yeah.
I appreciate everything you do. I'm looking forward to the books coming out. Did you say about the YouTube? Did you say about the YouTube channel? I think you said about the app. You said about your
Yeah.
books, but we didn't.
Historic haunted hotspots. I mean, sorry, hidden haunted hotspots. The stuff that we've done with Kayla and Eric are out or going to be out on YouTube, so people can look those up and see some of the things that we've done. So
Awesome. Mark,
yeah.
I appreciate your time. Please give Carol a kiss for me for letting me have you for an hour and 40 minutes, because that's a very long time. But I do want you to come back on at some point.
All right. Yeah.
And
Just let me know.
oh my gosh, yes. And when your books come out and everything, I really, really would love for you to come back on. It has been an honor having you on Paranormal Brew. Like I said, you are, somebody that I've highly respected and looked up to for many, many years now. So I'm very appreciative of you coming on.
My
And
pleasure.
yes. And great show. I'm ready for another hour and 40.
I might have to
I could
rest a
talk.
little bit before that.
Yeah, I could talk about Gettysburg. Anybody that knows me knows my love for Gettysburg, so I could talk about it forever. And then you're on here, so I could keep going, but we're going to let you go. And
Well, we'll see you this weekend, though. So
yes, I
that's
will be there this weekend. I hope everybody tunes in this weekend. I will be investigating with everybody at Mark's store, Ghosts of Gettysburg, in Gettysburg this weekend, Friday night. So I hope everybody joins me. I'll be on Paranormal Brew and on YouTube. So that'll all be streaming on there. So join us, please. And Mark, I love you. Thank you so much. And we will see you around.
that sounds good. Thanks, Taryn.
Thank you.